Hello everybody, got another video for you, same view. Okay, let me dig deep into the jar. Hope you're all well. Okay, pick one. Why people stay in abusive relationships. Why people stay in abusive relationships. This is what I think. This is my opinion. This is what I have come to the conclusion of all the years I've worked with people and studied and been through my own experiences. When we are with someone, and it doesn't always happen straight away, it's sometimes like the frog in the pot. It's a slow build up to the abuse. But of all the people I've worked with, and even people that have been treated quite horrifically by their partners, there's still this pull sometimes to kind of reconnect. It's like a magnet. It's like two magnets that want to connect. Even though this person knows in their head that this person isn't stable, they're not consistent. But when they're good, they're really good. And when they're bad, they're bad. And I realised, having been in an abusive relationship very early on in back when I was a late teenager, I got involved with a guy who was absolutely love bombing me. Now, what that means is that they fawn over you, they love you, they tell you you're the best thing since sliced bread, I can't live with it. Yeah, they really go hell for leather. And because I was quite insecure and quite didn't really think a lot of myself, I just loved it. I just loved it. I was like, this is, when I looked into the mirror of this person, I felt loved, important, special, desired. I felt like I'd never felt before. It was like a drug. Now, this is a few years ago now. I'm 62. This was when I was 19, 20, 21, that kind of age. And no one had ever said those things to me. No one had ever treated me that way. No one had ever looked at me that way. And I just was addicted to it. It was almost like an addiction. Because this person made me feel euphoric, like I never felt before. And I'm telling you, you can get addicted to that. Now, he wasn't the most stablest of people. He would disappear and not turn up for days, and he wouldn't contact me. I didn't know where he was, but every time he'd come back and he'd tell me all these things, and he'd tell me how much he loved me and how much he wanted me and how much he desired me. And in the mirror of him, I felt fantastic. But the trouble is, every time he wasn't looking at me, I felt like a drug addict needing a fix. And I became someone I didn't actually recognize. It was quite an interesting experience because I was not jealous. I wasn't untrustworthy. I wasn't untrusting towards people. I was quite naive, I think, in terms of that. I just took people as they were. But as I kind of got involved in this relationship, I became quite jealous, untrusting, skeptical, worried, anxious. And because, he couldn't keep that up. He couldn't keep that up. He could do it for a certain amount of time, all that adoring and fawning and love bombing, but then he would, fall out of that and go off somewhere else and probably do it with somebody else. And so it was like a roller coaster of absolute euphoria and to the pain and the depths of my being that I'd never felt before. It was like this roller coaster. And when he was love bombing me, life was good. And when he wasn't, I was scared, anxious. I felt vulnerable. I didn't trust him. My intuitive knowing, my whole being was like red flag, red flag, red flag. Well, I hadn't really paid any attention to that because I was very disconnected. I wasn't really embracing of my emotions. I was very repressed. And so I didn't listen to it anyway. All I knew that he made me feel like no one ever made me feel. And it was almost like he made me feel like I was the only one that made him feel good. I was it for him. It's very euphoric when someone says, oh, without you, I'm nothing. And, you know, Ree gave me this record of that song, You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings, as if like I held him up. And so I felt important, I felt significant, I felt beautiful, I felt desired. I was euphoric. I was high on love. And this is where we become love addicts. And I think it's almost like I think he played the victim part very well. It's like, I'm a broken, wounded human being, and you're the one that can heal me. So he kind of played that card as well, which I felt. And when I look back, I'm laughing because it's like, wow. And it's not laughing. I mean, believe me, it was an interesting experience, and I learned so much. And I could definitely feel the more it went on, the worse he treated me. And because I was so keen to get my little hit of love from him, that adoring, that I would put up with his bad behaviour. He's not rocking up, he's not phoning me, he wasn't stable, he wasn't staying in contact, he'd go off for days on end. And I was convinced, I was very, I knew intuitively something wasn't right. And when I told him about that, he's like, oh, you're imagining it. So he totally gaslit me. And in some respects, I think he was very interesting. Not interesting. I woke up, put it that way. I got this revelation while I was in that relationship of what was actually happening. And in that, it was quite profound. And I can see how helpful that was for me. It helped me wake up to what I was doing. Now, and don't get me wrong, it took me quite a few years. It's like I was in a trance, and I was. And in that, I felt quite childlike, as in needy, vulnerable, on edge, anxious. I was like a child looking for a daddy to make her feel safe. And because I'd never felt not loved, and because I never felt important or significant, I was looking for him, and of course in his mirror I was somebody, and I got addicted to that. And so as I started to go through this, because it was like I had this perpetual broken heart, anxious, vulnerable, wounded, and I was acting in ways that I did not approve of. Like I was needy, I was, jealous, I was on edge. I didn't like who I was becoming. I mean, didn't have great self-worth at the beginning. It seemed to go down into a downward spiral as I went through this relationship. And it's interesting to talk about your own relationship, because maybe you felt the same way. But anyway, that lasted 2 years, and at the end it was like I kind of woke up to the realization that I was addicted to him. But he was like anything. Sometimes drugs are not good for us because they can't make you feel good. They can't make you feel whole, not consistently, not long term. They give you a hit, but then it wears off, and then you become this needy. And sometimes I can totally relate to people with addictions in every level, because in that moment I was an addict. I was a love addict. I think a lot of us are, especially if we haven't felt good about ourselves, especially if we haven't, had a lot of time and attention given to us. And back in the day, that's what happened. We didn't get that time and attention. Kids were seen and not heard. And I'm not making excuses for that, but we know different now, and we know that's not the way, but that's the way it was. And now we live in a different world, thankfully, where we know that, that doesn't lead to good self-worth when you're just told to be seen and not heard. So I can look at it with a great deal of neutrality. I'm not triggered by it. I don't hold any resentment towards him. I totally processed and worked through that experience, and I actually appreciated what I learned from it, because if I hadn't, I don't know where I'd be now. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Like, what would I be doing? Anyway, after that experience, I knew what I didn't want. And so, of course, I went out into the world looking for something very different, and that's when I found and met my husband, who is stable, consistent, reliable. Maybe he didn't, shower me with all these, love bombing, but actually I didn't want that, because I knew that that was a red flag. I knew that wasn't okay, and I knew that. But you talk to a lot of people in domestic violent relationships, they will, that is usually where it begins. It starts off like that, and then it becomes something else. And I think the trouble is, I look back and I think, wow, thank goodness I woke up. But I might not have done, and I think a lot of people don't. Because I think what happens, and I don't know this is just my opinion, I think what happens is it turns into like a parent-child relationship, where the child feels totally responsible for this parent, and the parent seems to make them responsible. Well, you're not doing this, or you're not doing that, and they kind of play that part of the perpetrator, the abuser, and we're the child, the person that's stuck in that relationship, becomes almost childlike in needing that person, and not feeling safe if that person's not okay. And so it's ultimately giving your power away. And so if you've been brought up in kind of that kind of environment, which a lot of us did, you will often then recreate that scenario with a person outside of you as you go into adulthood, whereby you are looking to please, you are looking to feel a sense of worthiness. Oh, well, they need me. They need me. And so... And I say to women when I find out, and I say, well, in a way, and because they blame themselves, oh, men, why didn't I leave? Why am I stuck in this relationship? Why don't I have the courage to walk away? And I say, yeah, but you couldn't, because you were a child. And I said, it's all well and good, because a lot of people will beat themselves up and blame themselves and go, well, I'm an idiot for putting up with that behaviour. And I go, I don't think that's helpful to actually judge yourself so harshly, because what I see is there's this dynamic of childlikeness and parental sort of authority, dominance. And of course, they use that to their advantage, and they kind of know that you need them and they kind of need you, but they need you more in a way. And so the reason you don't leave, or you feel like you can't leave, is out of fear, because what will happen. And it's like a child stance. And I often say to women, you think about children in domestic violent, in relationships where there's a lot of DV, they can't run. They haven't got the power. They feel impotent. They feel like they haven't, because they're at the mercy of this parent, right? Without them, they'll die. And it's the same kind of thing. And this is why women who can look actually, or men who can look like they've really got themselves together, but actually end up in these really unhealthy relationships where they feel they can't, because they're terrified. Because as a child, it's all black and white. And when you're in that child space, it's like it's terrifying. They haven't got the capacity to leave that relationship. And I think as a therapist, it helps that person realize that they can't judge themselves for that. That it doesn't work if they do. Well, they can judge, but it doesn't work if they do. To offer yourself, or that part of you that stayed, compassion. To actually come through for the part that wasn't able to leave that relationship for whatever reason. And I think it's a tough one. And when you talk to someone and you say, so, did you feel like you had the courage to leave? You see, it's okay looking back on that experience and go, oh, well, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. What was wrong with me? I'm an idiot. Like, I'm so weak and pathetic. And it's like incredulous the way people treat themselves sometimes, instead of, wow, having some compassion for that part of you, that they felt so stuck, they felt so terrified, so afraid. Because a lot of the time, these people that are in authority and domineering are scary people. They're like, this is when they get into the real sort of, you're responsible. If I beat you up, then you've done something wrong. And so they totally gaslight them. And as children, what do? They're egocentric. They think everything's their fault. And so in a way, they get stuck in that childlike persona and give their power away to this dominant person. And that can happen even as an adult. You see it in the child-parent dynamic, but you can still stay stuck in that child dynamic as you come into a relationship, even as an adult. And this is what a lot of people, I think, don't realise. And I kind of... So when someone comes in and they're in a domestic violent relationship, I never say to anyone, oh, you need to leave, you shouldn't put up with this. And because they know on some level it's not okay. But I don't do that. That's not my job. I'm not telling people what to do. People have to decide. And I say, well, this is what we can do. I can help you develop healthier self-esteem, a healthier self-worth, change the way you think about yourself, change the way you treat your emotional part, do your work, become more empowered. And then as you realize, as you do that and come more into an adult space, then you can make decisions. Then you can make choices, and it's down to them, not me. No one, because we can all sit there looking from the outside and go, oh, you shouldn't put up with this, you shouldn't do that. But that person is intrinsically sometimes tied to that other person, and until they wake up, do the work, and become the adult they want to be, have the strength and courage to walk away and stay walking away. Because a lot of people they know it's wrong, they know they shouldn't put up with it, and they'll leave, but then they get drawn back in because nothing's really changed. They haven't developed into that ego persona, the adult persona, so they can make adult choices about their lives. And so I totally get why people stay in DV relationships, because they feel impotent, they're terrified normally. This person, it's like better the enemy, hold the enemy closer, that kind of thing. Especially if there's kids involved. I have a lot of compassion for people who are in DV relationships. And I think we need to stop telling people what they should and shouldn't do. We need to help them grow and develop into healthy adults. And sometimes that takes a bit of work. So I'll always say to someone, because they come in and it's almost like they are, oh, this is what's happening at home, and okay, so obviously you're there, there's a part of you that and so I don't want to disempower anyone. I'm like, okay, so you're choosing that, helping them to understand that on some level they are choosing that, albeit in an unconscious way. And so I just focus on the person and do their work. And as we do that work, they start to wake up and realise what's happening isn't okay for them, and it's not really working for them, and it's never going to work for them. And it's like they grow into an adult, that strong, capable, competent adult that's logical, rational, can make healthy decisions for themselves, and realise this isn't going to work for them. And that's when they might make the decision to leave. But then it's their decision, their responsibility. I'm not responsible, because I know a lot of people in the DV circuit will work with women, get them to leave, and then those women or men will go back to that environment, and they're pulling their hair out going, what's wrong with these women? Well, or what's wrong with these men? And I get it. It's like, I totally get it. And I go, well, I give people the respect I think they deserve. It's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life. I'm not going to tell you how to live it. You have to make that decision. And so I'm there to support the individual and help them do their work so they can feel stronger, more capable, more courageous, come from more of an adult persona where they feel empowered. Because for me, the child is very much the victim, powerless stance. The adult is the competent, wise, logical, rational part. The parent can be overly bearing, harsh, judgmental, dictatorial, but they can also be mollycoddling. And so you're realizing, for me, I like working with the 3 different egos to help people understand where they're at, where they flip into, because sometimes, you know, you go back to your family home that you grew up in, and it's like you become a child and mummy wants to make you dinner, you know what I mean? And it's like you slip into these personas and you don't even realize it, where you feel like, you know, they're being a parent and you're acting like a child. And so for me, that's a very good theory to use to help people. But I totally get why people stay in DV relationships. And so healing that individual, helping them realize that they're important, they're courageous, they're brave, they're capable, they have more power than they ever think they know themselves to have. So is the way to help somebody wake up to actually and make good choices for their lives. Do what they need to do in any given moment or time. So yeah, does that make sense? It kind of made sense when it came out. But anyway, if it doesn't, please tell me. If you want me to say more about that, or maybe questions that you'd like to ask about that, because I think there's a lot of people out there struggling. I know I've worked with a lot of them. So yeah, don't feel free to just make a comment or say something. Anyway, thank you for listening. You take care. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.